This is Coder Radio, episode 270 for August 17th, 2017. Hi everyone, and welcome to Coder Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. This episode is brought to you by our two fine sponsors, DigitalOcean and Linux Academy. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. My name is Chris, and joining us, he's back this week after what probably was a heck of a set of circumstances, I would imagine. Hello, Mike.
Hello. I am back, but I am in the Northeast right now.
So all I know right now is that you are traveling. The last week we had missing equipment, and that you are still on the road today. This is the only thing I can imagine, because this is literally all the information I have, is that you are on the run from Florida, something flipped, and you got out of there. And so now you're just making do on the road, which I kind of respect. It sounds kind of fun.
No. I'm up north for my mother's birthday.
Oh, that is not nearly as entertaining as...
And we just had a little snafu with the airline and my luggage, so...
You know, I pictured
Staples.
something... Oh, man, I was looking for something a lot more dramatic.
No, but I am flying out of New Jersey.
Is it good to feel... Is it good to be back? Did you miss Christy? I mean, it's good, right? It feels good.
It was a little weird, actually. I was sitting on the beach, and he just kind of showed up.
Yeah, see, all these great Chris Christie jokes have been coming up since you moved out.
I missed them all.
Yeah.
Then I'm going to be flying to North Carolina. So next week's show is going to be from North Carolina.
Really? What are you doing in North Carolina?
You know what? I just love me some barbecue.
Well, that's good enough reason right there. I'm doing a little traveling next week, too, although it won't affect this show. But yeah, so I just want to mention right here at the top, meetup.com/Jupiter Broadcasting, if you're going to be in the Oregon area Monday, August 21st, 2017, and you're going to be watching the total solar eclipse of the Heart 2017 edition. Let's hang out. And I don't know, I have like a tentative planned meetup location right on the coast of Oregon at meetup.com/Jupiter Broadcasting, but I'll have the live tracker on me. I may be moving around depending on the herds of people or the clouds or something like that. So it's a travel week for you and I, but here we are, like soldiers, continuing on.
Like soldiers, coding, radioing.
So are you at a family? So are you bumming family Wi-Fi right now, and you got like a makeshift headset? Is that what's going on?
I have a Logitech headset from Staples. The finest $40 headset you can purchase.
Oh, man. You know, when all else fails, I guess it's sort of nice that you can at least run down, get something that's USB and plug it in, and at least, you know, it makes it work. So
makes it work. I'm actually on the old family Wi-Fi, and not the most generous internet service plan here.
Yeah, almost every time I visit family, I'm like, I kind of want to redo their Wi-Fi. I just want to redo their Wi-Fi and talk to them about their internet options. But perhaps instead we should try talking to them about TypeScript. There's a little bit of love over at Linux.com for TypeScript.
Yeah, apparently the Penguins have heard the good news of TypeScript.
Didn't they get the memo that this is a Microsoft open source technology?
Well, you know how it is.
Yeah, it's a new world now.
Microsoft loves Linux.
Right.
This is like a West Side Story situation we find ourselves in. I'm
going to be sitting here writing TypeScript on Visual Studio Code on my Ubuntu desktop, SSH'd into an Azure server running Linux.
Listen, so I know someone who did that this morning.
Yeah, I know it is the new world. I'm still a little uncomfortable with it, but I'm learning.
It is Microsoft loves Linux.
What this really said to me, though, is that this is the sort of continued momentum that seems to be picking up for TypeScript. Like, just when you thought TypeScript was down, it keeps coming back. And
I don't think it was ever down. So
I felt like it was not down, but I don't know. I guess I felt like you and I were sort of skeptical that long-term it was really necessary.
Well, you know what happened, right? A lot of the TypeScript ways of handling classes and, just some of the TypeScript features ended up getting adopted in JavaScript.
Yeah. Well, and I suppose, too, that when you have a massive company like Microsoft behind something like this, they can sink quite a bit of time and just keep making it better and better, so it just gets more and more competitive, too, and it's going to turn more and more people onto it.
Yeah, I think, this show's been going on for a long time, right? We've talked about CoffeeScript, ClojureScript. I mean, get a noun, put script behind it, and we're good to go here. It seems like TypeScript has just one, right? Like TypeScript has.
Yeah.
I still hear a lot about ClojureScript, but like not nearly as much, right, as I do TypeScript. And CoffeeScript is in the Rails ghetto, which I know we don't have as a topic today, but how the worm has turned on the gold MacBook Ruby hipsters.
Yeah, I think we must have both seen that article about the death, the quote unquote death of Ruby or whatever it was. Yeah,
that's just it's just what
I saw that. It seemed like hyperbole a little bit. To call the death of Ruby seems sort of like saying that Apple's going out of business.
Well, it's never
maybe more accurate. Microsoft is going out of business.
But I've been spending a good deal of time, I would say, within the last 6 months of updating a bunch of Rails 2 apps to Rails 5. So there's like big enterprises who went with Rails, and let me tell you something. They're going to be riding on those Rails for a long time. Those apps are going to outlive all of us.
Yeah. So look at Microsoft though, getting the love here from Linux.com. So this is a whole introduction to TypeScript, a whole setup for it here, and then a comparison to CoffeeScript amongst others, and then sort of a case for why TypeScript.
Can I make a crazy comparison?
Yeah, go for it. I love those.
Vala.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like TypeScript is Vala, but useful.
Oh, or popular.
Ooh.
Widely used.
Gnome people, please send your hatred too.
Mostly now just elementary OS folks. But yeah, okay. I will leave that. I will. I was just reading through here. He has a software engineering and consulting firm. So I was just going to say I might leave a link to that in the show notes too, in case people want to check it out.
Yeah, check it out. Do you know what you might write in TypeScript, Chris?
What's that?
An Electron app, such as Atom.
Yeah, so this is a thing. Atom 1.19 is out, and the really big feature that they put, the top thing, big like heading 3 font, improved responsiveness and memory usage. It introduces a native C++ text buffer implementation that improves responsiveness and memory usage. Saving a file now happens asynchronously without blocking the UI, which that's nice. And
that's good. We like that.
Large files now consume less memory. Also nice. You think there's a reason that they're really stressing the performance aspect of it, and that's something they really focused on in this release? You think there's maybe some baggage when you're an Electron app there? So
I now code in Visual Studio Code pretty much all the time, which is also an Electron app.
Okay.
I tried Atom several times, as past listeners will know. For whatever reason, Atom was always significantly slower for me. So it's interesting to see them focus on that, because people would tell me that I'm crazy, that there's no like discernible difference between the two. Not been the case. I know Microsoft, which again does Visual Studio Code, does have some like their own crazy performance optimizations. It's nice to see GitHub do the same thing. GitHub is the publisher of Atom. I do wonder, though, I guess I have to question the choice of C++. There was another C derivative language they could have picked.
That's where you go with this? I thought it was sort of interesting that they had to go C to really make their system more responsive. So, because I hate to be an Electron hater. I think it's lazy to hate on Electron. I think
you do it every week, so you must like it. But
I think it's inconsiderate of the broader market dynamics of releasing software for multiple platforms, and so that's why I was quick to jump on this post here by Mo, and it's in defense of Electron. Now, I'm not saying I agree with everything in this article, because part of his perspective is, users, what do they know? It's more important what feels good to the developer. And I'm okay, well, I don't really completely agree with that, but I do agree with the business case. And he thinks, and I agree that while it is controversial, a new company without a lot of resources has barely enough really momentum to even enter a marketplace to begin with. And 3 independent code bases is just literally
ridiculous.
It's too many to maintain. You just can't do it. And every time you make a change, you have to make it across 3 different code bases, which is a monster project. And it's almost just easier to say, sorry, we're just not going to ship for that platform. And
that would be Linux in like every case, and then Mac in most other cases.
And so the worst case on Linux is, you ship an Electron app, and a percentage of the user base is, sorry, I don't use Electron, I'm not going to use it. But probably the majority of the user base on Linux at least gets the app versus no one getting it. So that's sort of the other unspoken compromise with Electron is, it probably pisses some people off, and some people only have 4 gigs of RAM, and one Electron app can eat almost all that up. But on the other side, there is a huge percentage of Linux users that now have an application that they didn't have, and they don't care about that.
Right. I mean, all right, so there's a couple of things here, right? A shittily coded Electron app will eat a lot of memory, right? On average, it is true, a good Electron app versus a good native app, the native app is going to win in terms of performance and memory usage hand down. But you should be able to somewhat manage the performance of your Electron app, right? Like, you shouldn't consume 4 gigs of RAM immediately, unless you're doing something crazy or stupid. And I would even take a step further. If you really have those data processing or performance needs, then you should probably be offloading that to a server somewhere, right? Use something like Lambda from AWS if you're doing like heavy data processing, or Microsoft Functions on Azure, whatever the hell they call it, or Google just launched one relatively recently. Because, there are such a thing as servers that can do your hardcore data processing if you need them to. Or you're probably just writing crappy code that's not performing. Unfortunately, the reality is always kind of banal, right? It's kind of like, you didn't do a good job.
I feel like I'm going to get some crap for saying this, but honestly,
now that I've switched to Linux effectively full time, except of course the only laptop I have with me is a Mac because thank you TSA. I don't know how I would without Electron.
Right, exactly. That's where I'm at too. It's like this is pretty much critical to get me getting my work done.
I guess I would drop VS Code and go to Vim again.
Yeah, I
could. Or maybe
could.
Sublime. I mean, I used to use Sublime.
Yeah. There's. And I could run a few of these in the web browser, but then I'm just eating resources that way.
Which is the same thing, though, right? People who are like, "Oh, run web apps." Oh, I don't like Electron. It's like the same.
And the thing is this allows me to isolate out these even further. So, I feel like if my browser goes down, or I want to close my browser for some reason, it doesn't take out Slack or Skype.
Sort of like when Google Play Music burns your entire Chrome instance to the ground.
Mm-hmm. And so, and this is the part that people are going to think I'm just an idiot for, but I just build my Linux system with this in mind. This is the reality of 2017. This is what I consider maybe Linux's desktop tax. If I'm going to use Linux as a desktop workstation and I want abundant performance, absolute minimum is 16 gigs of RAM. And if it's a PC where I can control how much RAM I have in it, I put 32. I absolutely put 32, and if I could afford it, I'd put 64.
Do you really need it? I mean, so right now, because the only machine I have on me is that 13-inch little MacBook I have, it's only got 8 gigs of RAM. I think it's like the bottom i5, and it's running everything fine. My Lemur has 16 and an i7. It runs everything more than fine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. I only really, really need it when I start running a server process in the back end and virtualization and maybe a couple of containers, and then it starts. But this is sort of like why I tend to refill my RV gas tank at half a tank. I want to have plenty of runway, and so I want to be able to run 3 or 4 Electron apps along with virtual machines and other things that I consider useful for my workflow but could take up a considerable amount of RAM. I want to run them without having to really worry about it or without having to get slowed down. And to me, it's a one-time purchase. It's a one-time purchase of extra RAM that isn't that crazy expensive unless you're buying a Mac. And
I was going to say, and you can just do it later too.
That's
RAM is,
and it's like you're set. You're just set. Your system's set. You don't have to worry about this. Now, it's not possible for everybody, obviously, but that also Electron apps aren't for everybody. I kind of feel like it's it's one of these arguments that we've gotten locked into that discourages developers from using the platform, which holds back applications to end users, all because a bunch of neckbeards want to argue about RAM usage. It's sort of the same group of people that would like to sit around and argue about defragging a hard drive, or if it's better to leave your system powered on 24/7 or turn it off. Like that same group of people, because I'm one of them, that like to argue that stuff, are the same type of people that are influencing the conversation about the memory usage of Electron. But now everyone's so hyper-connected with Twitter and Reddit and Hacker News, etc., Stack Exchange, etc., all these places where you have these neckbeards coming in here and shitting on every great idea that somebody comes up with and bursting bubbles left and right. And I have spoken now to people that I can't say their names, but they're people that you would know their names. I know that's a really D-bag thing to say, but honestly, I just can't say. And I know this to be a 100% fact across multiple projects, that this is killing their momentum and enthusiasm now. And because I've been talking about this on air, on user air, and I've been getting contacted by people saying, yeah, everything you just said plus, and they're names that legitimately people know. This is really having a big impact. And I grant you that Electron isn't ideal, but I think people are used to having technological debates on Usenet and no one in the rest of the actual world ever seeing them. And now we're having these same discussions in places where everyone else is also at, and it is having an impact. We shouldn't be talking about this anymore. We should have just let the market figure it out. We could have just let people, ship apps instead of shouting down at people. All right, I'm off my soapbox about it.
Yeah,
I'm done.
Yeah,
I'm good.
It's funny because the people I tend to hang out with kind of by default, this is not an open question, even among the technical people. Like Electron won effectively, because it makes sense from a business perspective, right? No one wants to maintain 3 code bases.
Yeah.
And if you are the IT manager or the director of technology and you happen to like Linux, it is a lot easier to convince your CEO that Electron's okay to use than to get him to triple his investment on his custom piece of software.
A lot of people, though, will say, hey, Electron, Flash for the desktop. Why does it take so much RAM? What is Slack doing? The thing about Slack...
Slack has some crazy stuff they're doing.
Yeah, and the thing is it kills you in your web browser, too. It's...
Right.
Yeah.
This is what I used to tell people when they would be worried about running Rails. You are not Twitter, so let's update it. You are not Slack. Your needs will never hit that level.
You are not Slack.
Yeah. It's just, let's just think about Node.js for like a second, right? Which I laughed at for how many years. And I have tens of thousands of lines of Node.js code that I'm shipping. Because you know what? Eventually the technology gets better, right? It matures, patterns develop, standards come into play. The same thing is happening with Electron. And, we mentioned Slack. Slack actually recontributes to the Electron open source project all the time. I think, and I could be wrong, but I think they contributed most of the OS. We're not supposed to call it OS 10 anymore.
Oh yeah, Mac. Right. Yeah, it's now Mac. Whatever. It's now Mac OS or Mac OS.
Little MOS.
Mac
all
OS.
The native notification
Macouse? It's Macouse.
Because they are wise and powerful, they wrote an Objective-C. I got that.
Give you a ding for that. There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I guess I've read the Hacker News comments and I don't get it, because the alternative isn't that everybody writes a native Qt application, right? The alternative is you don't get this on Linux and in many cases Mac, right? That is because I do feel like we're in a little bit of a bubble here, because even like Mac is common. Mac is still only like 10% of the market, guys. Like everybody's running Windows 7 or Windows 10. It's weird that nobody's running Windows 8.
Well, a lot of the people that are making the software on the Mac, though. So that's that sort of benefits the platform, because then I want to use it, so they're compelled to release it for the platform they're on.
That's fair. Okay, so let's all whip out our Swift.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm too busy running Perfect on my web servers anyways, so I don't need Swift for the desktop. No thanks. I'm gonna write my.
Could you at least run the one that I sponsor?
I'm gonna write my machine learning with Write to Metal, and it's gonna all be done in Swift.
And then when Core ML Kit never gets updated next year, just like how many other things?
Yeah.
That's going to suck. Yeah.
All right. So speaking of the server side, let's talk about DigitalOcean for sponsor here on the Coder Radio program this week. DigitalOcean.com. Create an account and use our promo code CoderDigital. One word. You apply it. After you've created your account, you get a $10 credit. You can spin up a droplet in less than 55 seconds. Full-fledged, you'll be logged in, doing your thing. It's super fast because they use SSDs everywhere for all of the systems. One of the other things that's fantastic about it is they have 40 gigabit connections coming into the hypervisors, which means your internet connection's crazy fast. You combine that with the really fast SSD performance. But the other thing that's something we don't mention very often, but very nice about it, is when you use their private networking, A, if it's within the same data center, you don't pay for transfer, and B, you're getting their LAN speeds there. So that makes things like backups or connecting to a back-end database. Imagine you put a front-end Engine Xbox, and then it connects to your back-end systems. All that's over private networking. Those aren't exposed to the public internet. You're not getting dinged for any transfer rate, and it's using their LAN speed. You could really scale that out. And they have highly available storage that you can attach to your droplet as you need it. You can create team accounts if you're growing. A really simple API that DigitalOcean themselves builds on top of that you can use. And monitoring alerting, which I find to be extremely valuable. I don't really have any problems with DigitalOcean as uptime, but keeping track of our droplet usage is extremely valuable. And this does both. It'll collect metrics, monitor performance, and send alerts if something's going down. They have load balancing as well, and they've recently introduced high CPU droplets for those compute-intensive tasks. So check that out as well. And I'll just give a plug for some of their great documentation, too. This is nice because you can deploy an entire stack on DigitalOcean, just something just totally ready to go. Or you could just deploy a base system or just mess around if you want to learn. And they have really good documentation for that scenario. This one, I'm going to just point you to an introduction to continuous integration, delivery, and you guessed it, deployment. That's just a free tutorial over there at DigitalOcean.com. DigitalOcean.com, create your account, and then use our promo code of power, Coder Digital. That supports the show, keeps us going, and gives you a $10 credit, Coder Digital, over at DigitalOcean.com. So, let's revisit the topic of stand-ups for a moment. Whoa. My Echo started dinging at me right in the middle of the show.
Alexa heard you.
She did. Cancel. So tell me, what's going on? What are your current thoughts? How has Mike evolved on stand-ups? Should we burn them with fire? Should we throw coals on them?
I still hate them, but I found out why I hate them.
That's interesting.
It's because I have never seen them done correctly.
Sure, because they can't be done.
I was reading this old post on PM, the Stack Overflow for product managers.
God, you're old.
And I know. I really am. There is a comment there where I think this person in one paragraph solves the entire question.
Oh, really?
The problem is most stand-ups are done as status meetings and they're project manager centric rather than what they were intended to be. So imagine a stand-up where it was acceptable to say the following, and you might want to say this nicer. It has been less than 24 hours. I have no idea how long this is going to take. I don't know if I have any blockers because I don't have a proposed solution. So, yeah, that's my update.
I like that. It's very clear.
But you can't say that.
Well, why can't you?
Because you can't, because one, that's not going to be good enough for any PM.
What are we paying you for?
No, that's going to come off as flippant, right?
Yeah.
And also, there's always the counterproductive alpha dog developer who's going to try to come in and quote unquote help you, right? Because they're going to show how awesome they are.
Yeah, that's true.
And not even to hurt you, right? Like the worst kind is like, yes, and I think I deserve a promotion because I'm a mentor. Like, dude, no one should ever volunteer to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like if someone asks you for help, that's one thing, but because the truth is, if something's hard enough, one day just may not be enough to come up with a proper plan, right? And stand-up implies that there's no such thing as a problem. I'm particularly talking about daily stand-ups here. Mm-hmm. That there's no such thing as a problem that requires any kind of like architecture or
Right.
maybe
Some
trial and
problems
error
are longer
for
than
more
24-hour problems to solve. They take more than
It
24
also
hours.
assumes that you have like no other meetings and no other work other than that
In
project.
fact, just figuring out the problem can take, just before you even begun to figure out what a fix could be, just tracking down the extent of the problem can be more than 24 hours.
Right. And I think the bottom line comes down to, in the 10 years I've been doing this, every PM I've ever worked with, including myself, right, when I'm managing the project, has treated stand-up as effectively a report meeting, right, a status report meeting.
Business?
And they've used it as a metric to grade the developers. So what often happens is, well, I wouldn't say often, but sometimes can happen, is the developer who knows all the right talking points and how to kind of play the game a little better will do better. And I've seen this in my own organizations, that you have to be very careful of the, let's not call him Ruby hipster, but the guy who is a little more suave, a little more,
better at communicating.
Remembers the PM's birthday.
Well, people that are better at getting also fired up about an idea, too, and presenting it in a way that sort of rubs off his passion a little bit. Like, this person's really excited. Like, that kind of gets people going, too. Like, if you can just be a good communicator in a group setting like that.
So I went on this kind of vision quest of trying to figure out, like, what was the original purpose of stand-up.
In the swamps of Florida.
In the swamps of Florida. So much to the point that I ended up reading the original Agile Manifesto, where they don't appear. And I just kept reading about the, extreme programming. And what I found is that daily stand-ups were never intended. The idea of a daily, everyday stand-up per project is a perversion.
Really? Give me the science here. What's the science?
The science is, if you just Google it, if you look back at some of the leaders of the Agile movement, it was always sort of like a weekly thing.
Oh, okay.
Which then makes the entire structure just make a lot more sense, right? It makes so much more sense to do this weekly.
So is daily something that came about as PMOs just need to get a tighter and tighter grip on what's going on?
Right. So I have a theory, because then I started looking at dates on publication.
I would imagine you must.
I do. It's crazy, but I think I can support it, and I think I'm going to write a very long essay about it.
I like this.
As offshoring and remote teams became more popular, there was a linear correlation in organizations adopting daily stand-ups.
Okay, now give it to... of course.
Right.
Of
but
course,
the problem
because
is
you got
they
this
kept their
team that's offsite. It's out. It's maybe one of your first big development teams that isn't there in the office, because this is a while ago. So people are moving different time zones, communication barriers. Right. You really have a much harder time of keeping track of what's going on compared to previously.
Right.
This is good, Mike. I like that.
But this is where it all falls apart.
Okay.
The expectation and the structure of the stand-up, right? So when you go through a stand-up, I'm just going to give you like a very boring, like what most PMs will do. Hi, Mike, or hi, Chris. How's it going? Chris says blah, 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 blah. Awkward silence for 5 seconds, right? So do you have any blockers?
Right.
Now, you have a choice. One, how do you define blocker? Is you just don't know how to solve the problem. Is that really a blocker? Because then you probably have a blocker every day. Right?
Mm-hmm,
There's something you don't know how to do that you just have to Google. But if you say you have a blocker, well, who can we coordinate a meeting with to fix that?
Yeah.
Wah, wah, wah.
Right, because now the PMO's got a problem to solve.
Right, and now the PMO has a metric that he or she can measure.
Yeah. Yep.
And that, I will argue, that structure actually makes sense if the developer has had significant time to work on the problem. But if it's every day, you're never hitting... You just, I mean, you know how it is. Somebody calls, you get an email.
Oh,
you're not producing for 8 hours a day.
No, it can be, and that it can make such a stressful situation where you go into your day thinking I'm going to get X amount of work done, and then emails, and for me it's email, Telegram, and Slacks that just. By the time I get done answering all the telegrams, I've got new Slacks. And by the time I get done answering all the Slacks, I've got these emails. And all of them, it's somebody waiting to move forward. And I look down and I'm like, well, crap, it's already 1 o'clock. Like, I gotta just like stand up for a little bit and then just like try to get as much work done as I possibly can. And of course, I gotta be out of here by 5 because I gotta go pick up the kids. And like, it's just...
You have kids.
It's super stressful.
So how have developers adapted to this new situation? Keep your head down. Don't draw attention to yourself.
Right.
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 So ironically, and this is my thesis here, the daily stand-up has created the lack of transparency problem it was trying to solve. Because instead of like incidental lack of transparency because you're not in the same room, you have intentional lack of transparency. Because you know what? No one wants to be on a remote team and say, listen, man, I'm working, but my stomach hurts. So yes, I'm working, but I really don't know how far I'm going to get today.
Would it all be solved? I know this isn't possible, but would it all just be solved if everyone working on a project could just read and write the code, and like they could just look at it themselves? They could build it on their local machine and check it out. They could read the bugs. Like, wouldn't it just be easier if everybody working on a software project just knew how to write software? I know that's impossible, but imagine for a moment that everyone, and maybe it's only, get this, maybe it's only a team of 3 people. I know this is insane. Maybe it's only a team of 4 people, and they all know how to read and write software. Wouldn't that be so much easier?
So I think there is a role for like a PM who's more of a customer champion type person, who's someone who is stronger on the written and verbal communication side,
yes.
but maybe not so technical.
Especially as the size of the company scales. That's why I know it's impossible.
Right. I do challenge a few things though, right? Like QA engineers who can't actually like pull a server log or do any kind of scripting. Like that, I would say, well, actually that person probably doesn't need to be in the status meetings or the stand-ups because they kind of muddy the water.
This is interesting. So you have, I mean, I wonder if it's possible to attribute all of this to your thesis here, but so this sort of overdoing it on transparency caused a pendulum swinging back effect of developers keeping their heads down and actually creating things more opaque than transparent. And you have to imagine it's probably not just one dynamic doing it, but that really does seem like it could play a role, because the problem you have, and I absolutely ran into this, was you never knew where to draw the line, and they would always tell you to draw the line a lot further back than you'd think. So, for example, I got pushed back into a corner. I've told the story before where I've had to submit change control requests and go to committee meetings twice, two of them, to update the printer driver on an HP print server, because I got backed into a corner after a series of updates that went wrong from Windows, and they wanted more fine-grained control over changes that were done. So really small, like changing the permissions on a share, updating drivers, that all became managed by a PMO, because what ends up happening is it's like a branch effect. You go down a path and you identify a problem, and that branches out into them trying to propose a bunch of solutions and bring in more people, which then branches out into more problems, because as you bring in more stakeholders, they have more, and it really turns into this massive amount of work that doesn't actually get any of the work I need to get done. It's work that facilitates it in a sense on a political side, but it doesn't actually get the work that I need to do on the server done. And that is, when that started happening, I definitely would just, what I would start doing is I would do a change control for something major, and I would write it in a legitimate way, but in there I would include as like a line item driver updates. Like I would start basically attaching riders that I would just slip in under the larger bill. And that was my version of keeping my head down, is instead of actually articulating all of it for them, I just started burying it in other things that they needed to get done. And that was the only way for me to really get my work done without having to attend 2 or 3 meetings to do one thing.
Yeah, I think that's what happened, right? Because organizations have a bad habit, particularly large ones, of when something bad happens, they develop a process to make sure it never happens again. Except that process itself has a weight to it, right? So let's take the nightmare scenario. Why are people concerned with remote developers? Because there's some opportunity for remote developers to just like simply not do the work, right? Or to like pad their timesheets or whatever. And I have actually had that happen to me. I've had people I've contracted to pad their timesheets. But you just fire that person, right? And then the best part is if you hire them as contractors, it's really easy not to pay them because there's no labor department. And that's also material fraud. But big companies don't think like that. A big company wouldn't say, great, take me to court because you committed fraud. A big company would say, well, it's cheaper just to pay them what they're asking for. And now we'll develop this this process that requires a daily check-in, right? And this is where I know a lot of our listeners are writing about their PMs. I actually don't think PMs are evil.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have worked with one that I really don't like in the past, but if you understand the incentives, the PM's really not trying to build anything, right? His or her job is loss mitigation, or at least that's how it's viewed in a lot of these organizations.
I agree.
They're supposed to make it so that everything the business could have done to facilitate a successful project happened. And if the project still isn't successful, in some organizations, they usually just blame the vendor or the developers or whoever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the PM will develop a process, and Agile is a process that has become very popular. So once you violate that process, like let's say you don't do the stand-ups or whatever, that's immediately a red flag for them because one, they've been told that there's a reason for this, and two, they're accountable for holding you accountable to the process.
Mm-hmm.
Not the actual outcome of the project, but that you followed the process. Because they probably didn't hire you, right? So if you suck, somebody else hired you. But anyway, that's my theory, that it was a good idea perverted by insecurities and in terms of working with remote and offshore teams. And we went from weekly to daily. And I would actually challenge you, if you're a PM out there, or better yet, if you're a CTO, try it. And I've been doing this. Just try it. Go weekly for a month. I think you'll have better morale. And by the way, if you do have a bad apple who's robbing you or who is just shitty, it will be so much more obvious. Because if it's a week and they have nothing to say in that meeting, then now you know. But if it's a day, it's super reasonable for, hey, you're booking me down with meetings.
Yeah. That's good. I like that. That's a good theory here laid out on the Coder Radio program. And it definitely feels like it, at least my memory, matches that sort of same timeline of as outsourcing grew, these processes grew. Good one. I like that. Mike's talked a lot about some of these things, like these different processes, like Ruby, and there's a way you can learn more, and that's our second sponsor, linuxacademy.com/coders. That's where you go to support the show, and you'll get access to over 1,200 hours of in-depth video content, lab material, flashcards, hands-on training, and instructor mentoring when you need it. How great is that? How great is instructor mentoring when you need it? They have topics that range the base Linux stuff that's like essentials that if you're maybe moving over to Linux platform or you realize you need to know more about Linux or you have a job that perhaps wants you to know more about Linux, you want to challenge yourself, they've got great courseware on that. But then they'll go up the stack too. Google Cloud Platform, AWS, OpenStack, Azure, big data topics, containers, the DevOps black hole. It's a really great platform, and it gives you a bunch of tools and hands-on scenario labs, course schedulers that can match a busy schedule, learning paths if you want to go down a series of courses planned by their instructors for specific career tracks. Also, speaking of specifics, if you're going for certifications, they have courses created specifically to prepare you for those exams. The community full of Jupiter Broadcasting members, like I always say, but I mention that because they got forkable flashcards, like some sort of open source project up in there where people just make the study cards better and better. They have offline study guides and tools, iOS and Android apps. What a platform. linuxacademy.com/coders. Go there to support the show and sign up for a free 7-day trial. linuxacademy.com/coders. Also, if you're doing AWS, check out the Orion papers. This is something Linux Academy just launched, I think today or recently. linuxacademy.com/Orion papers. It's a tool built by their AWS instructor, Tom, who was himself a student, obviously, at one point, and decided to create something that would help students understand the concepts that they're being taught around AWS. It looks like a really great project. linuxacademy.com/Orion papers, if you want to check that out. But support the show by going to linuxacademy.com/coders. linuxacademy.com/coders. Thanks, Linux Academy. Mr. Dominic, you tweeted an article earlier. Was it today? Yes, it was. A little bit before the show started. Write drunk and edit sober. According to science, Ernest Hemingway was actually onto something. Well, I guess his old saying is that he used to write drunk and then he would edit himself sober. Well, it turns out that someone's done a little science to show that this actually has some real sound reasoning behind it. And they link to the science behind writing your code drunk, or perhaps maybe a book, and then editing it sober. And they talk about the creativity process with alcohol. They talk about how much alcohol, why some too much is bad, but why you do need some. Anyways, if you ever needed an excuse to have a few drinks at lunch and then go back and bang out some code, we'll have a link to that in the show notes.
I think we've all hit the Balmer peak. Yes.
Oh, man.
And do send that to your PM along with the rest of this episode and see what they say.
Do you have any thoughts on this? I mean, honestly, do you have any thoughts on this? Because I've noticed it with actual writing, like if I'm writing something for a show, it does actually help sometimes, but it's not like a tool I go to. Be honest.
Yeah, it's. I can never say that I have engineered that situation. No.
But you found yourself in that situation. Have you noticed any boosting creativity?
So I would say there's a high correlation between coding early in the morning or at night. But actually, no, because early in the morning it's coffee.
Yeah.
So
You know what
I would say no.
It's interesting you say that, because I've been getting in the sweet zone. In fact, today I did so good. I didn't even open up Slack or Telegram or email until 11 a.m. And that felt really good. And because I've been finding that if I somehow get a good night's sleep, like when that happens, if I get up like around 6:30. And, after I just kind of shake it off and I just get some water, I don't eat, I don't have any caffeine or nothing like that. And I just sit down on my computer, I can start cranking through like a deep, long article that I need to read for a show, or I can write out a whole bunch of notes. Like I can crank stuff out so fast. I could also, if I wanted to, I could plug through a ton of emails and telegrams, but I try not to, because that can be very draining and sometimes upsetting. But I've been finding mornings are like this peak cognitive work time for me if I get a good night's sleep, and I avoid all pretty much human contact except for my significant other. And then in the afternoon, sort of like post-lunch or post-Coda Radio, say if it's like a Thursday, I then sort of switch over to more socializing on my emails, on the telegrams, catching up with people, answering questions, that kind of stuff, which is like requires less brain power. And so I can be more like ADD when I'm doing it. And no alcohol involved. Just timing the types of work I do has made a big difference for me. And just sort of realizing that I'm a little better at doing some work in the morning, and I'm kind of better or more suited to do other types of work in the afternoon, and just going with it. That's been good. There you go. That's all you have for it. That's all you have? Okay. Well,
I don't have much. I mean,
it's good. It's okay.
I can't say it never happened.
How's Alice? Right, how's Alice doing? Give us a little Alice update before we go.
Alice is good. She was on Beta News because
I saw that. I gave that a little mention in the Unplugged program recently.
I did. I love Unplugged. I'm always behind, but I will listen to it. No, good. I'm at an awkward point. Closed our first couple sales.
Oh, good.
So that's good. Trying to get this set up as a recurring SaaS model, which is different than what I originally thought. So that should hopefully be out by next week. And reevaluating the whole remote work thing, the having no office space. I think we're going to do a hybrid.
Oh, really? What is a hybrid?
Hybrid, I'm looking at one of these co-working places.
Sure.
Contingency. Because one of the problems is I need to hire a sales development rep. And, those roles require about like a 4-week onboarding, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's just probably too hard to do remote, especially because it's not really my field. So,
and this would be like would it be an assigned space, or would it be like you go in here, whatever space is available, you get to have it for the day when you're in?
So I'm talking to a few. It varies. The ones I seem to be preferring they're like assigned for 3 months, but they're small. But it's completely furnished. Like they do all like these stuff about like coffee and the amenities,
like the furniture, like the desks and chairs
and it's
too.
Like it's very small, but also like relatively affordable.
That's one of the worst things about getting an office is if you don't have furniture for it. That's such a sink.
such a sink, and you end up buying crap, and it's terrible.
Yeah, and then
the other problem is, of course, that you have a lease, and like, I don't love dealing with real estate people.
No. Boy,
Sorry.
that sounds like that sounds great, really. I tell you,
Yeah.
every now and then we've toyed with the idea of not having a physical space. But because, it's really, with the podcast network, you could, but it's with production, it's so nice to have a good static environment that it just makes a lot of sense. So,
well, I try to not have it, but I'm getting very quickly overwhelmed with all the work.
Yeah.
And the easiest and most cost-effective thing for me to hand to somebody else is going to be like the sales type.
And if it's not too expensive and you can swing it, just knowing that you have a space you can go to.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm looking at places that are like $300, $250 a month. Like, we're not talking a lot here. But their deal is they're contingency spaces. So if you keep it for more than like 12 months, they throw you out. Because it's a weird situation where, like, if you're interested in something like this, I'd recommend you look to your local government, because a lot of counties will subsidize these. So they really like cost $500.
Huh.
But what happens is
it's like a small business subsidy or something where they're trying to help.
It's a tech startup incubator, but I would only just be renting the space. Like, that's it.
That's interesting.
It is, yeah.
Probably a pretty good compromise.
Well, because the other thing I'm afraid of is if I rent a real office, it's going to be much bigger than what I'm looking at. It's going to be much more money. And then I'm going to feel that weird gravitational pull of, now I have an office. Now, if you want to work for me, you have to work in Plant City, Florida. Yeah. Oh, but I travel like half the year, so what's the point?
Plus, it's like another minimum amount of revenue you have to always be bringing in to pay for that thing.
And I can't express how little I like real estate people. Like,
no offense to you real estate agents driving around listening right now. We love you.
It's mostly like people who like buy buildings.
Yeah.
They turn in, like, every office I've ever had has had a pipe explode and flooded.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Isn't that funny? Yeah.
And like, people are really good at collecting rent.
Or the AC on the roof starts leaking. There's always that.
Right.
One. Yeah.
Right. Like, really good at collecting rent, really bad about preventing water damage.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. And then when you move out, they're always like, oh, we need to inspect it. I'm like, yeah, we're a computer company. What do you think happened? Like, did like an Ethernet cable get stuck? What? So, yeah. Anyway, we're not going to go back into my 10 years of disliking.
Well, so I'd be kind of curious to know how that goes if you land on something. And I guess next week you'll be on the road again. So we'll do one more road show next week.
And then I'm back in Florida. So
yeah, very good, very good. I will be back and totally eclipsed out when I will have seen the cosmos by the next time we see each other.
You see that like every day though, Chris. I mean, come on.
I guess it's supposed to be pretty. I guess if you actually are able to go to where there's an actual 100% legit total eclipse, I guess you're actually supposed to be able to see quite a bit, more than you'd think than you can normally see. I don't know.
Oh, I was just commenting on your drug use again.
Wow. You're the one that had the alcohol article in here. Jeez Louise. Anyways, maybe I'm going to come back and I'm going to be enlightened.
Alcohol is not a drug, according to Jeff Sessions.
You should be nice to me. Because I might come back enlightened now. And that could be valuable. I could start advising you as an enlightened being.
Yeah. You're going to start writing Swift. I can hear it already.
All right, Mr. Dominic, anywhere you want to send people throughout the week?
Go to themadbotter.com and follow @themadbotter Inc.
Of course. Also follow Jupiter Broadcasting Network @JupiterSignal. Support the whole network. Patreon.com/JupiterSignal will often post live versions of our shows when YouTube allows up there. And also, there is a new Patreon exclusive podcast posted on our Jupiter Signal Patreon page as well. Join us next week for the live show, jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. For that, send us your feedback at jupiterbroadcasting.com/contact and join our subreddit at coderradio.reddit.com. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next week.